Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order tonight's meeting of the City of Santa Rosa Planning Commission and ask for roll call, please.
Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present.
All right. With that, we'll move to the approval of minutes, and it's my understanding we don't have any at this point to approve, so we will move on to public comments. And public comments is a time for any member of the public to come down and address the commission on matters of interest to the commission that are not listed tonight as a public hearing. I have one card, Dwayne DeWitt. You have 3 minutes.
I'd like to use the overhead if I may. Thank you, Miss. Appreciate it. See if this bad boy comes on. Technology. It's always waiting. Here comes Santa Claus, here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane. All right, that doesn't count against my time, I hope.
I won't count it.
Thank you.
I didn't know you could sing.
All right. Every kid can sing at Christmas. Yeah.
We just redid all the tech in here. I don't know why.
That's all right. Except they probably paid too much for it.
I'm sure they did. Go with it's broken.
No, it's not broken. It was working on Tuesday. I was here.
It was?
It was working.
Worked at council meeting?
Yeah, buddy. So here's the thing, because I know you're in a hurry and you got big plans ahead of us. If the technology doesn't come forward, we'll do it old school.
I don't think it's going to work.
All right, buddy.
The camera's not working.
But I bet the clock works. Right? Yeah, okay. Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland, now in Santa Rosa. And I just wanted to say I'm a proud graduate of Santa Rosa High School also, because there's some Santa Rosa Panthers up there in the background. All right, and we got sound too. It's a wonderful day, and I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about some new things, but first I'll reference the past. And I know some people get stuck in the past and they can't go beyond it. But that's not me. I bring you things from the past so we can have better plans for the future. And this is really important, especially as you see all these young people up here. They're going to have a hard time trying to live in our hometown here. And this isn't new. This has been known for decades. So I bring to you today something from the late 1990s. I met Miss Cisco at the turn of the century, and before then, we'd been having a battle to save Journey's End Mobile Home Park. All righty, stop Home Depot we did. And the thing of it is we saved Journey's End, that affordable housing. Now we need you to save it again. That's a really important thing. There was a story back in the paper back then that pointed out that the elderly folks were facing eviction. The point of the whole thing then was we knew we had a housing crisis at the end of the last century, and we've let it go all the way forward. So now it's been even worse because of a man-made calamity, perhaps. The fires, we don't think they were naturally started. And they burned so harsh and hard because there was fuel up in the area where the fire had been before. And that fuel had come because planning commissioners at the city of Santa Rosa had allowed building in an area where it was advised against. So we've been actually making our housing crisis worse, with both the city and county jurisdictions almost deliberately playing into it. The city had a motto when I was a kid called "The City Designed for Living." Now it's actually the city designed for leaving, because there's not enough housing. We're at least 6,000 to 7,000 housing units short. There are people living in tents less than a half a mile away over in Roseland in freezing weather. Difficult times. It's up to you folks to be a bit more proactive now. Not just say, well, what does staff say? Actually look at it like, what do you want to do? Because you have the appointment from the elected official. So you can push back on them, and I'm here to show you I'm going to keep pushing back. You can fight City Hall. We saved Journey's End once. We're going to try to save it again, and we're going to ask you to help us to get more housing. I may speak later on the medical building knocking out housing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Anybody else want to come down and speak under public comments? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else rise, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period and move on to Planning Commissioner's report. And tonight we have a new Planning Commissioner, and we need to have his oath administered. So I believe Mr. Maloney is going to handle that.
Before you begin, could you tell us who appointed him, please?
That would be Jack Tibbetts.
Thank you, Miss.
Yeah. All right, can you please raise your right hand and repeat after me? I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Akash Kalia, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon
discharge the duties upon
which I am about to enter.
which I am about to enter.
Sign right here.
So welcome, Commissioner Kalia. I'll try not to pronounce your name wrong again. So would you like to say anything?
I just want to thank Councilmember Jack Tibbetts for appointing me and for being able to serve on the commission. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Great. Well, we're very happy to have you. Any other planning commissioners' reports tonight? Okay, I'm not seeing any. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to department reports.
All right, good afternoon. I'd like to give some attention to items that have made it to City Council since they've been with the Planning Commission. They've moved on and forward. The first of which is the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. The City Council did pass that ordinance on December 5th. I just wanted to make note of a couple of, for the most part, they accepted the Commission's recommendation, but there was a couple of amendments to that. They did keep a deed restriction attached to that ordinance, with the exception that the deed restriction could be removed if there was an affordable housing contract associated with the one of the units. Second amendment was to allow for the garages to be converted without replacing the parking spaces, but subject to proximity to transit stops and other criteria that would have to be applied to that. Otherwise, they supported the ordinance and moved it forward. They did add a follow-up resolution that is going to be scheduled for December 19th, and that is to look further into fee reductions for second dwelling units, and that is specifically at if there's opportunities in the southeast, southwest area fees, looking at appropriate percentages for second dwelling units to, in relationship to that fee. So that's December 19th. And then, as you might have read in the paper, the council did act on the comprehensive cannabis ordinance. Again, they generally supported the Planning Commission's recommendations on the very complicated and comprehensive ordinance. So there was only a few additional amendments to that, just to make note. In terms of personal cultivation, they kept the recommendation of 6 per residence, though they clarified that it would just be for the primary residence, not 6 additional for a second dwelling unit or a junior dwelling unit. And they also landed on a limit of outdoor cultivation for personal use to 2 mature plants. So 6 total, and a maximum of only 2 that could be outdoors. In addition, they looked at the setbacks to schools, and I know the commission had recommended 1,000 feet, but they amended that proposition and reduced it to 600 feet as a setback to a school. Of course, as you know, that ordinance as enacted does address adult use and medical use for cannabis. The ordinance will have its second reading on December 19th, and then if enacted, would be in effect January 19th. Upcoming items that have been at the commission are now moving forward to City Council will be Round Barn Boulevard General Plan Amendment. That is scheduled for December 19th. And update on staffing that supports housing and these programs. Like I had mentioned at our last meeting, the city has opened a rebuild permit center on room 6 of City Hall, and that center is fully equipped to handle all the building permit applications necessary for properties within the Resilient City area, the area that was directly impacted by the Tubbs fire. We've also thankfully received some additional professional services budget for our departments, so we should be able to start addressing the backlog of housing permits and commercial permits that we need to get to agenda and get to consideration. And then in addition, we did receive some support at the City Council last Tuesday to support the cannabis program. It's an interdepartmental effort to support such a comprehensive program. So it affects police, fire, code enforcement, planning, and other departments. And so they did pass the resolution that enabled us to hire some staff to address that. And so that will help us get the program up and underway and be successful with information out. And always a reminder, if you have questions or want to keep up to date on Santa Rosa's rebuilding process, srcity.org/rebuild is our direct website. For broader issues that aren't specific to the city of Santa Rosa, SonomaCountyRecovers.org is the overall recovery combined county-city effort site. And looking into January, we're looking at planning a welcome event for Roseland. Roseland has been annexed as part of our city. It has been always part of our city, but it's incorporated now, which is great. And the welcome event is scheduled for January 20th. And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you. Okay. With that, we'll move on to statements of abstention by commissioners. Anyone abstaining tonight? No, which is great. Okay, so what we're going to go ahead and do is move on to the first of our public hearings tonight, 8.1. I believe it's pronounced Indy 1 LLC Cultivation Facility, conditional use permit on Industrial Drive. It is an ex parte disclosure. And Commissioner Weeks, anything to disclose?
I visited the site. Nothing further to disclose.
I visited the site and have nothing further to report.
I visited the site and have no new information to report.
I also visited the site and have no new information.
I also visited the site and have no new information.
I also visited the site and I do not have new information.
Okay, and I also visited the site and nothing else to disclose, no new information. With that, Cheryl Whitfield is our staff, and we'll give the staff report.
Chairperson Cisco, members of the Planning Commission, good evening, and welcome to our new Planning Commission member, Mr. Kalia. The first item on the agenda is an application by Indy 1 Company for a cannabis cultivation project. This is a conditional use permit The applicant is in the audience this evening in the event you have any questions. This is an application for an indoor cannabis cultivation facility with an existing approximately 20,000 square foot building of light industrial zoning. It is proposed to have 10 full-time employees and 10 seasonal employees on site 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The intention is to have 24/7 monitored security system with continuous on-site patrolling 24 hours a day. The applicant will be providing 25 parking spaces, 1 van ADA space, and 3 bicycle spaces are proposed as a condition. They will have a cannabis cultivator license. The project is located on 3320 Industrial Drive in a light industrial zoning district. This is located west of the 101, north of Piner. The general plan is light industry. The zoning is light industrial. So background on the cannabis cultivation in the city. On October 9th, 2015, the Medical Marijuana Regulation Safety Act was signed into law. And the council in 2016 approved Tier 1 priority, which is pursue current opportunities for medical marijuana, cannabis cultivation, lab, and employment development. And in January 19, 2016, the council initiated comprehensive policy to regulate medical cannabis operations. In February 2016, the council adopted interim zoning ordinance allowing commercial cultivation with an MUP or CUP, depending on size, in an IL and IG zoning district and LIL combining district. On October 2, 2016, August 2, council directed zoning administrator to issue a zoning code interpretation to address the support uses that connect a licensed cultivator with a licensed dispensary. And on June 13, 2017, a moratorium on cannabis cultivation in the LIL district was approved. With regard to this application, the history is as follows. On July 13, 2017, the application was submitted. Whoops. On August 15, 2017, a notice of application was sent out to property owners. At that time, no comments were received by staff. On December 14th, 2017, today, the item is before the Planning Commission hearing. The site is surrounded by industrial uses. To the north is automotive manufacturing. To the south is vacant tile warehouse building. To the west is the UPS facility. And to the east is a construction supply company. To the further west, over 600 feet to the west, across Pioneer Creek, is residential. And over 900 feet to the southwest is Schaefer Elementary, which is depicted on this map. Okay. So this shows the subject property in the middle of the LIL zone. And I'll actually use my laser. So this line is Pioneer Creek. The Coffee Park residential area is to the west, and Schaefer Elementary is to the southwest. This is an area of the project site. Okay. Surrounded by industrial uses on all 4 sides. The building exterior proposes no exterior modifications other than the change of the 1 window in the front elevation to be reduced in size. Currently, there's side windows to the front glass door that will be modified to include just a front glass door. Other than that, there's no windows on all 4 sides of the building. Okay. The access to the parking area is to the north side of the building. The rear of the parking is completely enclosed and fenced in. That will be the employee parking and the sensitive material delivery. Non-sensitive material delivery will happen in the front elevation and where the roll-up door is. Okay. This slide shows the proposed total layout of the site. Industrial Drive to the left of the project on the west, and the fully fenced rear parking area and trash enclosure area as well. This plan shows the existing and new proposed floor plan modification in order to contain the cultivation uses. This is the proposed, the existing and proposed elevations. At this, I'll use the laser. At this point here is the front elevation of the building. So the applicant proposes to eliminate the side entry window and just keep that window door right there. Okay. Other than that, there's no changes to the exterior sides of the building. This proposed floor plan designates by color codes the specific uses by code. So the support uses are in maroon. Oops. The cultivation uses are in blue. I'm sorry. Okay. Which is, and the storage facility is in a darker blue. Okay. Since the notice of public hearing went out to surrounding properties, the public comments have been received both in email form and in voicemail form, and those comments have been made part of the public record and provided to the planning commissioners. Primary comments received were pertaining to potential criminal activity and potential cannabis smell of the particular use. There was approximately 10 comments opposed to the project and 1 comment in support of the project. The applicant has provided a project statement indicating how the noise and the odor control will be addressed, and that is to be through HEPA filtering and carbon filtering. Security on the property is to be 24-hour monitored with an on-site security guard from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., in addition to roving patrols during daylight operations of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. They propose to have 26 parking spaces. The code would require less than that, but they're increasing it to 26 parking spaces, so it's been conditioned as such. They intend to control noise by having a roof-mounted HVAC system. Cannabis cultivation and processing rooms will have several layers of carbon filtration and air purifying devices in all rooms. There will be HEPA filters for all the incoming ventilation. The rear of the facility will be completely fenced, both that will contain the delivery area and the employee parking. There will be monitored building access, security patrols 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 7 days a week. Monitored alarm system and duress alarm system, access controlled, monitored security cameras, exterior lighting, vault room, and inventory management system. The warehousing and wholesale distribution in our planning code requires that there be 20 spaces for a building approximately 20,000 square feet. The applicant is proposing 25 spaces with an additional van space and conditioned for bicycle spaces. They intend to have a maximum of 20 employees with 10 full-time and 10 seasonal. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA under section 15301, which is applicable to existing facilities involving no expansion of the facility, and qualifies as class 32 exemption per CEQA section 15332. It's recommended Planning and Economic Development Department that the Planning Commission by resolution approve a conditional use permit to operate a medical cannabis cultivation facility within an existing 20,000 square foot industrial building located at 3220 Industrial Drive. That concludes the presentation. Open for questions.
Any questions of staff right now? Yeah, Commissioner Duggan.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify on that the ADA accessible parking space that's out, the van space that's outside, is that for a potential employee? Is that a requirement from the city?
That's a requirement for the city. It's in the front of the building.
But could it potentially be an employee parking space?
It's the total required parking per the code would be 20. And so the applicant is proposing 25, including then the van space. It could be for the use employee or the public, but our zoning code is not broken down to who can use the van space, just that there has to be an accessible van space, and it's provided, and it's accessible to the building through a ramp.
Okay, I'm just wondering if it could be for an employee, why is it not behind the fence?
If the planning commissioners believe that the preference is for that we can make a condition accordingly. The event space is available for all use.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
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 Any other questions before? Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
And is the applicant wanting to make a presentation? Come on down.
Thank you, Commissioners. I don't have a presentation, but I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have that I can help with.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind just stating your name for the record so we can...
Steve
help.
Monahan.
Great, thanks. Any questions of the applicant right now? No? Yeah, you want to ask yours?
Well, since I just brought up the accessible parking space, would you be amenable to putting it behind the fence? I mean, in case you had a handicapped employee?
There is an existing ramp to, the building is elevated to accommodate high bay loading. So there's an existing ramp at the front of the building directly adjacent to where that ADA space is. I don't know exactly where that'd be in the presentation, but just logistically, it seems to make sense that the ADA ramp that would make the building accessible, having the ADA parking space adjacent to that would make sense in my mind. But
I'm just thinking about security for employees potentially.
Yeah, if you feel that the need is, there's no ADA accessibility in the back, it's all stairs. So I think logistically that person would still have to come in through the front.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Great, thanks. We may have more after the public hearing. Great.
Call me now. Thank you.
Excuse me. Okay, this is a public hearing item tonight. I don't have any cards on this item. If there's, okay, you don't need to have filled one out, but go ahead. And you know the drill, 3 minutes.
I'll speak from up here, thank you.
Okay.
All right, Dwayne DeWitt from Roseland. Everybody must get stoned. That was a motto for my generation 50 years ago. We used to sing along with it for fun and double fun. It's good to see that now you'll be making money selling the stuff. But I wanted to see if you might be able to do some things that were a bit more practical for the community. I work in healthcare, so I don't touch the stuff, but I see folks that do. And I'm real interested in perhaps minimizing the potential for the criminal activity that sometimes occurs with these types of money-making situations. I would like to see there be less parking and perhaps put a couple of modular homes, like single wides, like they did up at Community Hospital, on the site, and have it be for on-site employee housing, and have employees there 24/7 so that the place was more secure. And that way there'd also be an opportunity for those workers who probably won't be making a lot of money processing the marijuana. The people selling it will make money, but the folks doing the work probably won't make much. So the idea is that maybe they would be able to live close to work, and they could perhaps partake if they were in need of that medical service themselves and wouldn't have to drive. When I was a youngster, we used to make jokes about we could have a loadie bus and people could get to where they needed to be and still do their medication, as they call it now. And if you just put a couple of nice spots to live there, I was thinking like Lodi Acres, a good spot to be for those folks that work there. And you got to keep some humor in this as it goes from being a good recreational pastime to being a cutthroat money-making business, and people just trying to figure out how they can always get ahead as they perhaps cut their quarter ounces and do different activities with people, trying to always maximize their profit. I think people need to keep that in mind about everybody must get stoned and do it for the good time. And as you folks look at this, think about how can we keep some humor in this business? Because we're spending more time trying to house marijuana growers than we are people, the homeless, the young folks in our community. And we could have easily put some of these warehouses to use to keep people in sheltered from the storm during this freezing weather. But we've been so interested in making a few bucks for the city in the general fund that we're more about helping the it's marijuana growers. So it's just one of those things I wanted you to hear, and do everything you can to maximize housing and not necessarily the weed, because there's plenty of weed around right now. And
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dwayne.
I'll turn this in so you got it.
Great, thank you. Okay. Anybody else wanting to speak on this item tonight? I'm not seeing anybody else look like they do, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing on this item and bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Okay. Any other questions of staff? Not seeing any. Okay. So would someone like to move the resolution for the purposes of discussion?
I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa making findings and determinations and approving a conditional use permit for Indy One LLC for the operation of an indoor medical cannabis commercial cultivation facility within an existing 20,000 square foot building located in a light industrial zoning district in northwest Santa Rosa. No exterior changes to the building are proposed. There is no retail dispensary component with this facility located at 3320 Industrial Drive, Assessor's Parcel Number 015-650-024, File Number CUP 17-078, and waive for the reading.
Second.
Okay, so that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson. And Vice Chair Edmondson, you want to go ahead and start the discussion?
Thank you. Once again, we have a cannabis conditional use permit before us where the application is tight and straightforward. The choice of location, very appropriate for this land use. It seems like the last several of these that we've seen, there have been very few unresolved issues from a code perspective or land use perspective. Just to follow up on Mr. DeWitt's comment, I do agree that so many of these spaces in our city have wasted and excessive parking and land that goes unproductive that could easily be used for productive use, either in commerce or to house people. I don't think that in the conditional use permit process it's the best time to attach conditions to projects, but it would be worth looking at code changes that would make it easier for the coexistence of housing and these low nuisance industrial and commercial activities, because we need to get as much land available for housing from wherever it may come as possible. And the same goes for the idea of using warehouses for shelter for the homeless. You know, I believe that, you know, that it's already set up in the code where a conditional use permit, it would be a permitted use, but if that's not the case, I think we do need to look at liberalizing the areas in which people can apply to permit a temporary shelter facility, especially in the wintertime. But I do support the project. I'm happy to see more cannabis businesses in the city helping employ people and keep these spaces occupied, and I'll be voting in support of the project.
Commissioner Groningen?
Just first, a very brief comment. I applaud whoever wrote the overview of cannabis cultivation on the project description. You read those first two paragraphs under that overview. They're very well written. They're also amusing, but they're to the point too. We've all read so many of these now, but this is probably one of the best project descriptions I've ever seen related to these matters. The other point that I would make, and I know that there was an email, I believe, public comment, or at least questions about the odor control system. I, as you probably know by now, I take a pretty close look at odor control on these types of projects, both for the benefit of the public, residents, or other businesses close by, but also for the developer or the owner here, because it's not only odor control, and if that would be classified as a nuisance, but also it relates to security. If that odor is up in the air and so on, that could attract people who may want to get in that facility when they shouldn't be. Taking a look at the mechanical system that's proposed here, the scrubbers and so on, I think this is more than adequate. It's a good project, and I plan to support it.
Commissioner Weeks.
I'm also in support of the project. I do appreciate that you having 24-hour security. I think that that's important for the neighborhood as well as your employees. And I also would like to thank staff for providing me a list of all the conditional use permits that have been issued so far. So I'm in support of the project.
Commissioner Duggan.
I'm also in support of the project. Despite my concern about the ADA space, I can make all the other findings. So I'm in support of the project.
Okay. Commissioner Peterson?
Before I launch into my comments, it looks like the resolution needs to be corrected for the address between the name and the first paragraph. It looks like it's 3320, and then in the whereas it's 3220.
Okay, good catch.
It's 3320 would be the address.
Correct. And I agree with my fellow commissioners. It's sort of becoming a broken record here. We're getting these good, clean applications that address the typical concerns we hear from the public, whether it's odor or security. I think along the same lines as Commissioners Edmondson and Groniga, it would be, I think, ideal to be able to integrate these kinds of low-impact industrial uses into a more mixed-use kind of neighborhood, especially in this particular location with its proximity to the SMART train station. I think there's an opportunity to sort of de-emphasize the parking, the commuting, and maybe emphasize other forms of transportation to the place of employment. All that aside, I think it's a good project, a good clean application, and I would make all necessary findings to support it.
Great. Commissioner Collier?
I do also support the project, and I want to echo my fellow commissioners, and especially Commissioner Weeks on her comments about the 24-hour security. I appreciate that, and I know that is a big concern for the community as a whole. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm also in support of the project. Again, it's another really tight application, and I know the late correspondence that came in, raised concerns about odor and security, and I think that was very well dealt with in both the staff report and in the applicant's writings. And so, Vice Chair Edmondson, you want to make your proposal here?
Yeah, I just want to propose a friendly amendment to the resolution to change the reference to the MMRSA to the MAUCRSA. If that meets with staff's approval, that was what we did for the last one.
And where is that in the resolution, that reference?
That is page 3 at 3C.
3C, okay. And that's a friendly amendment, so are you in agreement with that, as well as the correction to the address and the heading? Okay, great. Okay. So with that, the resolution was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson, making the friendly amendment to change MRSA to MACURSA, much better name, and correcting the clerical error in the heading to 3320 Industrial Drive. And your votes, please. And that passes with 7 yeses. And that concludes that item. So next we'll go ahead and move on to item 8.2, which is the Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital Medical Office Building and Parking Structure Conditional Use Permit. That is an ex parte disclosure. Commissioner Weeks, anything to disclose?
I visited the site and also met with representatives of the applicant, and nothing further to disclose.
I also visited the site and met with the applicant's representatives and have no additional information to report.
I visited the site and I met with Ms. Wright and Ms. Kapolchak, representatives for the applicant, and have no new information to disclose.
I also visited the site and met with the applicant's representatives and have no new information to disclose.
Commissioner Peterson?
I visited the site and I met with the representatives, or the applicant's representative, Sharon Wright, and have no further information to disclose.
Commissioner Collier?
I visited the site and did have a phone call with representatives for the applicant, Sharon Wright, and I have nothing further to report.
Okay, great. And I also visited the site and met with the applicant's consultants and have no new information to disclose. With that, Patrick Streeter is staff and will give a staff report.
Thank you, Chair Cisco, members of the Planning Commission. The item before you is a conditional use permit for the Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital Medical Office Building and parking structure. There's also an initial study mitigated negative declaration associated with this project. The actual medical office building by right is allowed in the zoning district. However, increased building height and operation of a parking facility require the conditional use permit. So that's the entitlement that's before the commission tonight. Additionally, pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, an initial study was prepared for the project, resulting in a mitigated negative declaration. So adoption of that document is also before the Planning Commission. The project is located just east of downtown near the intersection of Montgomery Drive and Sotiomi Street, immediately south of the existing Memorial Hospital. The project site currently is developed with predominantly single-story medical office structures, as well as surface parking facilities. It's also surrounded by similar hospital-associated or medical office uses. There is a multifamily development immediately south of the project site, and residential neighborhoods south of that across Sonoma Avenue and to the east of the project site. The project includes the construction of two major structures. The first would be a 4-story medical office building. Also associated with this project would be a 6-level, 600-stall parking structure. There's also on-site development with 58 surface parking spaces, as well as pedestrian connectivity and circulation components of the design. Some project history. In April of 2016, a neighborhood meeting was held for a concept of a surface parking lot on the site. That application was withdrawn in December of 2016. And that same month, a neighborhood meeting was held for the current project, which had the parking structure and the medical office building. In February, that concept went before the Design Review Board. And then the same month, the formal applications were submitted to Planning and Economic Development. In August of this year, a second concept design meeting was held by the Design Review Board to discuss modifications to the project based on guidance given at that first meeting. And pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, a notice of intent to adopt the initial study mitigated negative declaration was posted in October with a planned public hearing date of November 9th. As a result of the fires, staff resources were not able to complete the staff report, so at the November 9th meeting of the Planning Commission, this item was continued to tonight. The comment period for the environmental documents was extended to this current public hearing date. The general plan for the project site and most of the surrounding parcels is office and the zoning implements that general plan designation. The office commercial zoning district, as well as the office general plan, are intended to support uses which include medical and professional offices, as well as the supporting uses for office land use, such as cafes. So the height restriction within the office commercial zoning district is 35 feet. However, the zoning code permits an increase in height associated with a conditional use permit. There are no additional findings necessary for granting that increase in height. It's just the conditional use permit in itself is the entitlement. The medical office building will be 68 feet at its tallest point. The parking structure will be 56 feet along the parapet, with its tallest point being 70 feet at the top of the elevator tower. As you can see from the height study on the bottom of the slide, it's not uncommon for buildings to reach heights above that 35-foot height limit in the neighborhood. Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital has a maximum height of 70 feet, and the existing medical office building and parking structure at 500 Doyle Park Drive, I believe, reaches in the 50s as far as that building height as well. Pursuant to the zoning code's parking standards, the square footage of office space proposed with this building would prescribe 460 on-site parking spaces. The garage is proposing to have 600 parking spaces as well as 58 surface parking spaces. The intent behind this is to serve not just the medical office building, but other associated medical office and hospital-related uses in the neighborhood. It's not clear to staff at this time whether or not a fee would be required for the parking structure. However, the zoning code defines a parking facility as anywhere where parking is provided for a fee. So to allow for full flexibility of this development, staff is requesting that the conditional use permit also approve a parking facility on the site. As was mentioned, the project has been twice before the Design Review Board for concept design review. Assuming the land use entitlements are approved, the project is still scheduled to go in front of the Design Review Board for a public hearing to determine preliminary and final design review. Some of the design guidelines looked at by staff and that will be assessed by the Design Review Board include neighborhood design, so how the development works into the fabric of the surrounding neighborhood, as well as the architectural features and building design, the landscaping surrounding the site, and the components of the site that are involved with infill development, as the existing site is surrounded by development currently. As was previously mentioned, the initial study was prepared for this project with a public comment period extending up until the date of this meeting. Comments were received from outside agencies, California Department of Transportation, Caltrans provided a response, as well as responses from neighbors of the project. Some of the issues that were looked at by staff very closely included traffic. A traffic study was prepared for this project. Conversations between the traffic consultant, the applicant for this project, as well as city staff involved multiple amendments to the traffic study to really encompass all the considerations, and the results had suggestions for the signalization of the intersection of Sonoma Avenue and Sotiomi Street, dedication of right-of-way for improvements to the intersection of Montgomery Drive and Sotiomi, as well as the consolidation of existing mid-block crossings into a single enhanced signalized crossing at the center of this project site, which would connect to the pedestrian circulation of the hospital to the north. There are other issues. So that was also included in the pedestrian improvements. That was a topic of conversation at the neighborhood meeting, was pedestrian connectivity throughout the neighborhood. So staff wanted to make sure that diligent consideration was given to those pedestrian connections throughout the different uses that are associated with this project. Additionally, the fire department was involved in several discussions with the applicant team to make sure that all the fire standards were met with the passenger drop-off area and the rest of the on-site circulation, ensuring that there's adequate access to all sides of the building for fire personnel. public comments were related to traffic and pedestrian safety at surrounding intersections and street segments. Additionally, comments about the development existing and proposed for Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital, as well as parking in existing facilities, so the perceived or existing underuse of the existing parking facilities in the neighborhood in favor of parking on the street, which seems to be a common complaint, as well as concern for solar panels. So as was mentioned, pedestrian safety and traffic were the subject of several discussions between the applicant team and staff. And staff is at this point where they feel that, that safety and impacts to traffic are negligible. But we do have our city Deputy Director of Public Works for traffic in the audience tonight, as well as the consultant traffic engineers, W-Trans. So they can give more detailed response to the neighborhood comments, as well as comments from Caltrans and city staff's concerns regarding this project as it was moving through the review process. Regarding the development for the hospital, as well as for this site in relation to other hospital development, staff has had conversations with Memorial Hospital about a master plan for the area, something like that. But as far as development as it comes through the door, this development and other projects that have been approved in recent history in the area are consistent with the general plan and consistent with the zoning. So the general plan outlines how the city envisions development occurring in the neighborhood. And it also has environmental review associated with it that looks at the impacts with that type of development. And so the city's designation for this area is consistent with this project and with other projects that have been approved. If something is proposed that's inconsistent with the general plan, that results in a general plan amendment and likely a zoning change. And so then the impacts associated with that type of change from our general plan are then addressed through the public review process and through the environmental review process. Regarding parking, the project will be consolidating several existing uses in the area, including specialty medical offices as well as diagnostic imaging, which typically would require trips to multiple locations. Since these would be consolidated within one building, it's likely to result in a reduced amount of vehicle trips. It also may result in more or less parking than would typically be prescribed for that floor area of office. So staff feels that an overparked facility creates more flexibility for the use of the area and also may address parking concerns for the rest of the neighborhood. And regarding solar panels, as was mentioned previously, there are several buildings which are above the 35-foot height limit. Comment came in to staff that was just concerned about solar panels on the tops of the single-story buildings if approval of this building would then block out the viability, and it is a possibility. However, based on similar size structures in the area, there's a potential for any new development to cause that impact. There is the potential for this building to have solar panels installed on the roof of the parking facility, which would have a net increase in the solar exposure that development in the area has available. Also, by eliminating the surface parking and moving it into a stacked building, the potential for those surface parking lots is also moved onto this site for solar resources. And also regarding the public comments, staff just wants to note that while the agenda was published last Friday, attachment 13, which included the public comments, was not uploaded until this Monday. So anyone that looked at the agenda over the course of the weekend would not have had access to those public comments, but they have been available for the entirety of this week. And so because staff feels that the environmental review has been fulfilled and the applicant has addressed all of the issues that came up during the project review process, it's recommended by Planning and Economic Development that the Planning Commission adopt a mitigated negative declaration for the medical office building and parking structure and approve a conditional use permit for increased building height as well as operation of a parking facility. As I mentioned, several members of different departments of city staff are available for questions, and the applicant team has a presentation prepared as well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Streeter. Any just general questions right now? Yeah, Commissioner Weeks.
Patrick, can you show me where the mid-block crossing is going to be consolidated? Is that on Montgomery or on Sonoma?
It is on Montgomery, and if you look at the top of the site plan, there's an arrow highlighting some hash marks going across the street towards the middle of the development. So one of the main ingress-egress for the hospital is on the very top of this slide.
Okay.
So it would be located just to the east of that driveway, that curb cut, and it would be an enhanced crosswalk with the rapidly flashing pedestrian beacons.
Thank you.
Any general questions right now? Great, thank you. Oh, sorry, Vice Chair Edmondson has one.
So in the OC zone, we've got the height limit. Is there any floor area ratio aspect to the code as well?
There is a maximum lot coverage. I believe it's 65%, but there is no density maximum, so no requirement for building height beyond 35 feet once the conditional use permit has been approved, and no maximum for floor area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, great. So with that, would the applicant like to come down and make a presentation?
Good evening. My name is Todd Salness, and I'm the president for our ministry in St. Joseph Palace, Sonoma County. I really want to thank the Planning Commission for giving us a few minutes to give this proposal to you. We think our presentation might be about 15-20 minutes. I will be followed by Tyler Hedden, our COO, followed by our architect, who will all introduce themselves. What I wanted to do was just give you a brief kind of overview of what we're really focused on as a hospital and as a ministry, and then Tyler will help connect this project and help that so you could see kind of how this helps us accomplish our goals and our mission. So the three things when I usually go and talk to a public group about what we're focused on, I talk about first mission. Our whole existence is based on serving the underserved at the end of the day. And we do that by taking care of unfunded or underfunded patients, of course, which represent about 25% of our patient population. But also, we live that mission by helping people through their challenges in life that usually start or have some medical element to them, but usually are coupled with many other social challenges and others. So that's really one of our main focuses, to be a voice for the voiceless in the community. Number two, we're really looking at developing beyond a traditional hospital setting where we provide care. That's something you see consistent across not only here in this county, across the state and across the nation. How can we provide care more efficiently and not in a complex acute care setting? And we're really focused on developing an integrated delivery system of care that really coordinates how we take care of patients and really tries to prevent them to coming from in the hospital. And if we take care of them in the hospital, getting them out so they can be in a better setting to take care of themselves as well. And then the third, and also an important focus, is our regional presence. One of the things that makes us unique, you may or may not know, is that we really have a focus of being a hub. We're providing more acute care, more intense care at a tertiary level that you might see at an academic center here locally. And what comes with that is attracting a set of providers, physicians, nurses, and others who are up to do that, who enjoy taking care of complex patients and attracting them to this community to take care of all of us so we don't have to go to the East Bay or the city or others to deliver care. And that's something that I think is somewhat unique to our health system as compared to maybe others. So this project here, just going and relating that to those three projects, first and foremost, we have a lot of patients in our hospital all the time where we've completed their medical round of treatment, but they still remain in the hospital because they don't have any other place to go for their follow-up care or the follow-up that they need. At any point in time, you could come into our hospital and 15 to 20 patients in our hospital have absolutely no medical need anymore, but they need just to get in the right setting after they've had that treatment. So this will help us provide that environment more efficiently and more effectively so that we can get patients to the right setting and open up capacity. We are a very valuable resource for this community. We typically, during the flu season and others, have all our beds full when people still from not only this local community but from the region come to us for care where they can't go anywhere else. And when we're full, especially with patients that don't have a need to be in the hospital, that impacts all of us and what we can do. The second point, integrated care. We're looking at obviously providing care to patients, taking care of them in a state-of-the-art setting to help them prevent from coming to the hospital in the first place for the same reasons I just mentioned before. And also when care, after the patients receive their care, we need follow-up appointments. They need to connect with their specialists, other support services. And having this congregated more efficiently and have it congregated closer to the hospital, we believe will make it more accessed and basically serve the community better. And the third point about being a regional presence, being a regional presence is partly about the acute care setting, but it's mostly about attracting top-notch providers who want to live here and serve this community. And just like you're recruiting a top athlete, you want to show them your greatest facility, you have a better facility than others, and this is where you're going to work and practice. A lot of the dramatic stuff that we hear about happens in the hospital, but 80 to 90% of the time that doctors spend serving the patients is pretty much in their office. And so having a state-of-the-art facility will allow us to attract from other major metropolitan areas that we compete with for neurosurgeons and heart surgeons and other things to help us compete and bring the best and brightest here so we can take care of those people locally and they don't have to drive to the city and other places to receive their care. So that's what I wanted to present. Thank you so much for your time. I don't know if there's any questions for me before I turn it over to Tyler. Thank you.
Again, Tyler Hedden, Chief Operating Officer, St. Joe, Sonoma County. And thank you for your time tonight. Just wanted to hit a few key points. Again, Todd hit on a couple major points in terms of our transformative care, really, that this building represents. And so our patient experience, we really feel like it needs to be second to none. This facility helps us get there by combining multiple specialties as well as multiple modalities in terms of diagnosis. To get into specifics in terms of planning and programmatic space planning. So obviously we have the parking garage is a really big aspect of this, and it helps for accessibility to both our main campus and also the physician office as well. But on the second, third, and fourth floor is where we're really going to have a lot of the medical specialties. And that's going to integrate well with the first floor, where the first floor is envisioned to have radiology, a full radiology suite, complete with mammography and women's center and MRI, CT, all those things that you would imagine in a radiology department that helps us diagnose the patient's needs quickly. And that being in combination with our medical specialists on the second, third, and fourth floor really help our patients get the answers that they need to their medical problems more quickly. And so really bundling that all together in one trip to the doctor's office really makes a lot of sense for where we're trying to go in terms of our care goals, like Todd was talking about. So we're also programming the space. We have to ensure that we make it a pleasurable and a nice experience. We do live in an experience economy, and we want to have a coffee kiosk and those niceties that you would expect in a medical office building, and lab draws, and so you can get your blood work done, and those diagnoses really moved along quickly. Also looking at the potential of some retail space in the parking, the lower level of the parking garage as it faces Montgomery. So that is one thing that is something that's being looked at. One thing that I also want to point out is we're consolidating roughly 75% of other offices that are around the campus into this medical office building. So again, hits on the efficiency theme that we've been talking about, and really allows us, we have to be able to compete because be more efficient, because eventually that all contributes to a premium dollar that we all pay for healthcare, and that's part of what we're doing in terms of trying to be more efficient in providing care. Last but not least, I'd like to point out the parking structure. It is a rather large parking structure that we feel is necessary for both the current staffing that we have and also for our neighbors. This is something that when we have our quarterly neighborhood discussions, that's always brought up, is parking. And we do really feel their pain because we feel it too, and we think it's necessary that we have this parking structure of this size to really meet our needs for now and into the future. So with that, I would like to, any questions on some of the points that I hit?
Yeah, quick one.
A couple of questions. Could you tell me the sort of regional profile of the patients and the doctors and nurses and other staff who come to the hospital? How many of them are from outside of a certain radius, or even just a broader description about how many come from Santa Rosa, how many come from surrounding towns?
Our primary service area and secondary service area is really Sonoma County, and so that, I believe, attributes about 70% of our patients come from that area, from our primary and secondary service areas.
Is there a sense of how many are from outside of Santa Rosa versus inside?
I can't give you an exact estimate on that. I can follow up with you with that answer, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I think the answer is no, because I asked your representatives, but when it comes to the existing parking and the idea that there's not enough of it, there's no study that's been done of the existing parking facilities. It's mostly based on these meetings that you have with the neighbors and sort of anecdotal knowledge of,
we've also done parking studies as well, and that's part of the work that our design team has done as well.
These are studies about the utilization of the existing parking facilities?
Yes, and with the approximate staffing that we have and the parking spots available. Yeah.
Okay.
So we've looked at that.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Commissioner Weeks?
You said that some of the services in other areas of the campus are going to be consolidated.
Right.
So, for example, like will the imaging and radiology that's on Sodiomi now?
Right, that is projected to be consolidated, as well as other physician offices that would allow us to really serve patients more efficiently, because we would have just a single check-in area versus multiple check-in areas, right? And so we'll have one check-in area, again, that helps us be more efficient.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anything else right now? Okay.
All right, so Wesley Okamoto, our entitlements architect, will also be presenting.
Okay.
Ms. Chairperson, Mr. Vice Chairman, Planning Commissioners, good evening. My name is Wesley Okamoto. I am the entitlement architect from Memorial. And first, I'd like to thank Patrick Streeter and staff for doing an excellent job in putting this package together. They spent a considerable amount of time with us trying to understand the goals of the project, and I think he captured it very well. And we also thank you for considering this project this evening. We have a few slides here that we thought we could take it from where Patrick left off. He did a great job again, but we've also went through the process of designing the project. And we wanted to share a few of the elements that we had in there, just so you can understand where we have on our project. And we are going to be meeting with the Design Review Board, I believe, next week. So again, what we're here in front of you today is for the conditional use permit and the mitigated negative declaration. The three items on the agenda for tonight are the increase in the building height. And a lot of these are going to be kind of what you've heard tonight, so I'll go through it very quickly. And at the end, if you have any questions, we are flanked tonight with a host of our consultants, civil engineer, environmental, landscape, and traffic. So if there's any questions, we have all the right people here tonight. The height of the building, as Patrick pointed out, we did look at what's in the community right now, adjacent, and we are not actually the highest new building. Memorial does have one that's higher. This is the same image that Patrick showed. Parking, and it's been discussed a few times here right tonight, and just really quickly, we've heard the neighbors, and we've heard them about the concerns about parking in their community. So what we did is we looked at this project site and said, what makes the most sense about where do we locate a parking structure? And we didn't know that we have to have a parking structure to serve the medical office building because we didn't have enough space, land, to do it on surface. So to be most efficient, we studied, do we do it inboard, outboard, where do we put this parking structure? And it seemed to, at every turn, it seemed to make the most sense for us to move the parking structure away from the neighborhood as much as possible and locate it central to the medical campus, we'll call it. And this way, we're having traffic now being able to be served by Montgomery and Sotiomi instead of just one street. So we can have traffic now being dispersed and away from the neighborhood. So let's move into the buildings themselves. What we did was we want to make sure that we understood some of the concerns that design review would have. So we met with them initially, we heard what their concerns were, we went back, we studied what their comments were, and we thought it important enough to go back again for a concept twice. And so we went back, we want to make sure we heard and addressed some of their comments. And we think that by their reaction to the second concept design review board, that we're pretty much on target and aligned in our thoughts with them. Again, we're going back next week and we're going to make sure that we have it all nailed down now. So the buildings themselves on the site, these are large buildings that can go on the site. We feel that they fit within the context of the overall neighborhood, but we still want to make sure that we went one step beyond looking at the massing, but also understanding and addressing the human scale, which is at the street level, along Montgomery, along Sotiomi, and inboard on the drive-through. We have separate entrances to the garage, one on Sotiomi, or right off Sotiomi, and one right off Montgomery. So staff pretty much can use one. Visitors will probably use the main driveway coming off of Montgomery. So we don't have everyone congregating and congesting one driveway. Discussion already about the crosswalk. We looked at the location. There's two currently. Felt that it's more appropriate to line one at the parking structure where people are mostly going to come up and down and go across the street, communicating from the hospital to the medical office. And we really focused a lot of our attention right on the corner of Sotiomi and Montgomery, thinking that that is a major corner. Parking structure being on the corner here, we looked at it as an opportunity to be able to enhance that corner. So we did a couple things. One is we placed our public art along that corner. The other is we created a plaza right on the corner. So we have 3 opportunities for pedestrian gathering places on the site. The medical building itself, when we do medical office designs, we try to think of it from the inside out. Designing the exam rooms, designing the imaging rooms, a CT and MRI, those are kind of fixed, hard elements to design around. We're designing around the patient care, we're designing around imaging equipment. And so a lot of times these buildings are a little more square in nature. So given that, and what we know is healthcare is going to change. We don't know when, we don't know to what, but we know it's going to change. So we try to keep our buildings as flexible as possible, and that being no interior shear walls, wider bays, more regular bay spacing, aligning shafts, things like that on the inside. So that worked its way to the exterior of the building also. Knowing that though, understanding the intent and some of the goals for the city, is we tried to articulate the building with some design features and materials. Looking at some of our neighboring buildings at the hospital, recently there was an emergency department addition, and there's stack stone. So we drew upon that. The ambulatory care center right across the driveway. We tried to draw some of those elements. A lot of it's scale, some of it's color, a lot of it's texture. This is the parking garage right up from the corner of Montgomery and Sodiomi. And again, you can see there, and we're going to be working with the city's art commission or council to further design this element on the art. But what we're doing is we're creating a canvas here so we can go back now and work in a community to figure out what is the best solution for the art on this corner. Very prominent location. But we also have on this, to bring it down to the human scale, is a plaza that's going to be at the corner of the parking structure that can help pedestrians communicate back into the neighborhood. It's a large building, so we thought, well, let's enhance that with not just landscaping, but a green screen that grows up to it, so it becomes a living part of the neighborhood there. We looked at the entrance of the driveway too. How do we get in and out of the campus or this project? What we wanted to do was make it obvious, make it intuitive, and so thinking that, and make it convenient. So we'll have a driveway that comes in, there'll be a divided entrance driveway, so that ingress and egress are separated so we don't have traffic bumping into each other. We also have sidewalks going to the sidewalk and around the back, so patients, visitors can go from the parking structure to the medical office building's front door. Very obvious. It's very intuitive. The wayfinding here we should not have to rely on signage. The materials, again, we wanted to be able to tie the medical office building and the parking structure because it is one project, and we want to read as one project. So the bay spacing, the window spacing, is trying to mimic each other so they dialogue with each other. And back to the street level, human scale. We have the buildings themselves, but people walk down the streets. And we want elements, for instance, we are separating the sidewalk from the street. Currently, if you go there now, your sidewalk's right on the street, and it's a busy street, and we thought it would be more appropriate to have a parkway so that you're protected, the pedestrians are protected. We also have layering of materials on landscaping between the sidewalk and the building. So we have ground cover, shrubs, trees that create this layering effect as you get to the building itself, and then the green screen itself. We also have a covered awning or trellis, just again to bring the scale down at the street level. Bicycle parking is being provided, short-term and long-term, in the garage. I just talked about landscaping. The whole concept here is, again, it's layering, and the landscaping is to enhance the project, what we're doing on the building. It's not to take over. It's to work in conjunction with it. The mitigated neg deck, we want to just, and this is just a couple of highlights that we went through all the documentation. Again, the land use, we're consistent with the general plan and the zoning. There are no significant impacts. We do have a few mitigations to just further this case. A very extensive traffic study was conducted, and the only one thing that we found that we were in support of was to install the traffic light at Sodiomi and Sonoma. And there are multiple lots right now and multiple curb cuts, and we're cleaning all that up. We're going to make a parcel map, and this will be one project, one parcel. So I think that was the last slide. And again, we have all of our consultants here, so if you have any questions, please feel free to address it to us, and we'll bring the right people down.
Right, I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions, but we're going to go ahead and go on to the public hearing if we're ready to do that. Okay. This is a public hearing tonight, and so I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing here pretty soon. For those of you that haven't been here before, I'm going to kind of explain what happens. I'm going to call your name. If you would come down to the dais, it's probably best if you come down here. I'm not quite sure our timekeeper and our microphone is working well upstairs. Start by giving your name for the record. You have 3 minutes. And if you keep an eye on, there's a little light system here. It goes from green. As you start getting close to the end of your 3 minutes, it'll go to yellow, and then it'll go to red. I'm a very strong goes off and the buzzer goes off, I will stop you. So please keep aware of that, because we do want to hear everything you want to say. I don't want to have to interrupt you, but I will, to move on. So I'm going to go ahead and call the first name and also mention the second name so you can begin to queue up. So I'll open the public hearing. And first speaker is Matt Mullen.
Good evening. Am I to understand the overhead doesn't work? Is that?
I think that was our issue. Yeah, sorry.
So before, could I start my remarks before I do a housekeeping thing first?
What do you need to do?
Well, I was going to use the overhead, but since I don't have it available, I wanted to remind you to, as I'm talking, I have, with my public comments, there's a map that I put in there that's highlighted.
Okay.
And it ties into my remarks, so
okay.
I just wanted to share that and so that I didn't use up my time doing that.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So good evening. I'm Matt Mullen. I live on Parker Drive, a half a mile from the parking structure, the existing parking structure. I want to begin my remarks by sharing with you that I'm not here today to speak in opposition to the hospital or the operation of the hospital. My comments are primarily related to the impacts and the process that has brought us to today. As you see in my comments, I first brought forward the issues of parking, traffic, and pedestrian safety. A year ago at the first neighborhood meeting, the map that I included with my comments I presented to the hospital and the city staff at that time, trying to get ahead of it. I tried to do this the right way and get ahead before the plan really started to develop. And unfortunately, I'm here today to speak to some of the issues that I don't believe have been commented. I understand very well the benefits that the hospital provides. What's happened, particularly with the fires and the services they provided, has been a tribute to the community and tribute to the hospital, and I commend the St. Joseph's staff and hospital staff for all the work they've done during that. However, the hospital is also a major developer. They have spent tens of millions of dollars in the last decade and a half adding facilities and expanding into what has become a regional medical center. It does not give them the ability to get a free pass on their legal obligations relative to identifying impacts and mitigating those impacts. Essentially, they've expanded to the point where they're shoehorning a regional medical center into surrounded by residential neighborhoods, and there's an obligation there, not just as a good neighbor, but as a business provider to provide mitigation for the impacts they bring forward. I submit to you that both the traffic study and the mitigated neg deck are flawed documents and should be amended before you adopt them this evening, specific to the issues I've outlined in my comments. Traffic, they've done a traffic study, however, they didn't do any studies north of Montgomery, didn't include one of the most impacted intersections, which is 4th Street and Talbot, and many of you maybe drove that when you went and toured the facility. Parking has been well documented. The mitigation measures, we believe, and the neighbors, I'm sure, will speak to it, are not sufficient for the impact. Pedestrian safety, we recommended that they provide some bulb outs, some traffic calming on Montgomery Drive, and there's none of those in there, with the exception of some restriping and the intersection that they've talked about. So I appreciate the time this evening to speak with you and look forward to your comments and your action tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mullen, and thank you for submitting your written comments also. Next is Fred Howe, and Mr. Howe will be followed by Dwayne DeWitt.
Good evening. My name is Fred Howe. I live at 1310 Fair Oaks Avenue. I also have a rental property at 663 and 5 Doyle Park Drive. And my concerns mostly are around the traffic and the traffic study. The things that I have found is that the traffic study, as I read it, was conducted between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. Now that's a commute time, but that's not taking into account hospital visiting hours, patients coming and going from the hospital and from the new medical office building, and it doesn't take into account the French-American school that's on the corner of Doyle Park Drive and Sonoma Avenue. If I go to my rental property, I just plan not to go there between, say, 8:30 and 10 o'clock and 2:30 and 4 o'clock, because that's drop off and pick up from that school, and it's an absolute disaster. Also, I found that the Doyle Park Drive between Montgomery Drive and Sonoma Avenue almost becomes a one-way street, having to dodge in and out of delivery trucks and so forth. So I see that that street is going to be impacted by people circulating around trying to get to the new parking structure. I think the other thing that was brought up by the previous speaker was the fact that Memorial has not done a master plan, and as neighbors we find them purchasing property and then figuring out how to develop that. So it comes to you piecemeal, and we're not seeing a master plan that helps the neighborhood understand what their growth plans are. So with that, I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Howe. Dwayne DeWitt and Mr. DeWitt will be followed by Christina Sutherland.
Thank you. May I have the staff put up the slide that shows the site? I guess it would be called the plans. No pressure. No, that'll work. It wasn't projecting up there. Yeah, that'll work. Thank you. All right, before I even got started.
You're done.
Nothing but a good time with me, huh? Okay.
It's because you sang
All right.
last time.
It's because Miss Wright was here and she remembers. Okay. So my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Santa Rosa. I've been following Memorial Hospital, the spot that ate the neighborhood, for decades. I've actually been fortunate to work there at times. I've asked for the plan site to be up there so you can understand a couple things, basically. They've taken lots of housing out. Montgomery Drive and Sotiomi has lost housing. I would like there to be a direct one-for-one replacement of housing units that have been lost to commercial development. I've said that for decades as part of the Sonoma County Housing Advocacy Group. Essentially, now's the time for this to be dealt with. Let's stop losing housing units for people to build these types of projects. One way to have it work out is perhaps to put some housing on the top floor of the parking structure. That is totally reasonable and could be done in an energy efficient manner that could actually help them bring some revenue in. The reason why I asked for the plan site to be up there is if you look at the corner there on Sotiomi and Montgomery Drive, people already use the bus stop across the street as their smokers spot. You're technically told you can't smoke at a hospital, but everybody smokes. I mean, that's why they're at the hospital most of the time, is because they got lung cancer from smoking. And so I'm a respiratory therapist. I see them out there smoking, sometimes self-medicating with a fatty before they come in to get their respiratory therapy. Just the nature of life these days. But they'll be going to that corner. Sotiomi with that little plaza, that's going to become Lodi Central. They're going to be sitting out there catching a buzz, doing what they do before they come back in. That needs to be dealt with. And the people who live along there shouldn't have to deal with the overflow of patients coming into their neighborhoods. Essentially, when I've been over there before, people on Talbot, people on other streets, I think it's called Park Drive, they've been concerned because there's a lot of folks that basically don't respect the neighborhood. They're just there looking at it like, okay, this is a giant hospital complex. We can do what we got going. Memorial's been buying up houses. They bought houses for using for their staff. Some of the staff go and sleep in houses that they've bought. Those would be the medical doctors, things like that. So I just really think that this is like a really big impact that hasn't been thought out well with the community. And as the two previous speakers pointed out, there wasn't really a big community type of charrette, a big type of look at what we're doing to this neighborhood. It was more about, we got a commercial development and we want to get it in there, and we're business people, and that's the way this works. Money talks, away we go. I'm hoping you'll say, well, wait a minute, we have some other things to say. We'd like to see housing be saved. We'd like to see it be kind to the neighborhood. And though I appreciate they've moved the sidewalk back so it'll be a little bit more pleasant place to walk along, they need to do a lot more for that neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. And next is Christina Sunderland.
Yes, hello, Christina Sunderlage, Talbot Avenue. I'm a neighbor. And I first off do want to say that most of us are very, very happy that the parking garage and the MOB building are becoming more centralized to the core of the campus, not scattered out towards the neighborhood. And so that's a great advantage to all of us, I think, and to the hospital. The site issues that I'd like to talk about, however, are also very important. There's a very large oak tree, which didn't show up well in your packet, but I did take a picture of it today. It's an evergreen oak. It's quite lovely. There is no arborist report in the packet that I could find that talks about the health of the oak trees. There's about 4 to be removed. This is the largest, probably most stately one, and it's located pretty much just bottom center, I think, of where the parking garage is going. So what I would like to propose, and I know it sounds late in the game, but we as neighbors aren't notified for concept reviews, so we haven't gotten to give our ideas to the design review board in a timely fashion. But if you were to take the parking lot structure, the footprint, and flip-flop it where the MOB is, and you eliminated the parking below, you could get about the same amount of square footage for the parking garage. Now, they are overparked by about 200, as you've heard already, which is quite a few, and I think that could be well afforded. Of course, that goes into the master plan. If we all knew what was entailed here, one could maybe say that being overparked by 200 was a good thing because we would know what the future might bring, but we don't have that, as you've heard, and I've been asking for about 15 years myself. By flip-flopping it, you also gain the friendliness and the pedestrian cohesiveness with the art still being connected with the MOB on the corner, which creates this great sort of central area because the hospital entrance is right across, and you don't have 300 feet of expanse of parking garage along Montgomery Drive. Sorry, my voice is going. If it's flip-flop where the MOB is, you're only exposed to the narrow end of the building where you see the parking stalls, which are just not very attractive. No matter how much landscaping we all try to do, you don't really hide what a parking garage is, and it's not as pedestrian friendly. I would like to suggest that tonight you don't approve the CUP because I would love to be able to get some of this information, get some input into the DRB and see if there's any potential for flip-flopping. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? You don't have to have filled out a card, although it's helpful. And I am not seeing anyone move, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back for the applicant to do some responding to some of the concerns that you've heard here. And we may need staff to do some of that also, but let's start with the applicant.
When you ask the questions, we'll grab the right people to come down,
Okay,
if it's okay
great.
with you.
Well, Mr. Mullen, I believe you saw his comments or have had copies of his written comments, and he brought up a number of different concerns about the traffic study itself being flawed and should be amended, the reason for 4th and Talbot not being included, looking at the parking issues, bulb outs, traffic calming. So if you could just sort of speak generally to what you also saw in the concerns in his letter, as well as those other concerns that he addressed.
Darlene from W-Trans will
Great.
address that.
Perfect person.
Good evening, Chair Cisco and members of the Planning Commission. Daleen Whitlock with W-Trans here in Santa Rosa. We did look at the comments that Mr. Mullen had, and actually I've also coordinated with Rob Sprinkle of the Public Works Department regarding the study area and the reason why the specific study area was chosen, and more importantly, why other areas weren't selected. We did try to look at predominantly intersections of some import. They need to be at least a collector intersection with an arterial. This is why, for instance, 2nd and Montgomery wasn't studied, is because it's a minor street. It's not a major intersection. It's not one that would typically be included in a traffic study. We also didn't look at the traffic going north along Talbot towards 4th Street for a couple reasons, one of which is that the building is located on Sodiome and Montgomery, so would be expected to generate most of its traffic going out the other direction. The other thing is that predominantly if somebody were coming to this building, it would be from the area north of Bryden, or north of, in the Bryden neighborhood. And if they were coming from that direction, they would be making a left turn into Talbot and then a right turn back out of Talbot at College. Neither of those are critical movements in terms, usually if you're at a stop sign, it's the left turn that really gets bogged down and causes all the delays. What often happens in a situation like this is that we run the analysis and that you get to the answer and you, wait a minute, it got better. How could that possibly be? And it's because you're adding to the movements that have below average delay for the intersection. So it actually causes everything to go down a little bit. It's obviously very counterintuitive, and we routinely write that doesn't mean it made it better. It just means that it changed the way the balance of movements. So, bottom line was that in talking to staff, we really came to the conclusion that there was unlikely to be a significant impact at that intersection. And I mean, I would point out that we also looked at intersections that were much closer, and so would be more likely to draw higher volumes of traffic, and none of them experienced a significant impact. If there were going to be a significant impact, it's usually somewhere pretty darn close to the site, and this is a little further removed than some of the intersections we studied. We did look at the pedestrian facilities and access, and as a matter of fact, we were really glad to see that they were getting rid of their two existing mid-block crosswalks and consolidating that into one location. It's always a safety benefit to channelize pedestrians so that people are expecting them at that point. Probably everybody's driven down one of these streets, and particularly where there are 2 lanes of travel, the car next to you slows down and you don't even see the pedestrian that's on the other side of them. This is only 1 lane in each direction, so that doesn't occur, but it's still difficult sometimes for people to recognize, to pay attention and see pedestrians in the street. So if you've got more of them in one place, they really have a better chance of having seen pedestrians there before and be more likely to look for them and recognize that they're there. The last thing I just was going to talk about a little about the overparking, and that was a comment that Caltrans actually made in their comment letter as well. And while the parking is more than what is needed for the project itself, we we found that it was because it's putting it in a more centralized location, making it more readily accessible to the people who would use both the MOB as well as the hospital. Hopefully, it will pull some of the people who are currently parking in the neighborhoods, that because the existing parking structure is either less convenient to them, or it's also kind of tight, and they may not want to park in it for that reason, or people coming to the hospital may not recognize that those are hospital parking lots, and they may be looking for spaces on the street. So we were talking earlier about being able to really advertise and educate people about the parking by putting, one of the wonderful things about electronic media is everybody goes and it says park here. You look up where you're supposed to go and that you can say park here. You can have on a appointment reminder, park here. So it makes it very easy for the hospital to implement policies and programs that will readily direct people towards the parking and get them off of the streets in the neighborhood. And I think that those are Mr. Mullins' questions, but if I've missed anything, I'd be happy.
Yeah, I think you covered Mr. Mullins, but while you're there, Mr. Howe brought up how you determined the times that you studied and his concerns about not taking into account visiting hours, shift changes, the impact of the French American School.
So the traffic counts are typically taken, we do a 2-hour period, 7 to 9 in the morning, 4 to 6 in the evening. The reason those hours are chosen is because they tend to represent the worst case conditions of the entire day. And certainly if the school children are being dropped off and there's a lot of activity around the school during the morning peak hour, that would have picked that up. Because we're studying the periods when there's the most congestion due to people going to work, going to school, going wherever they go first thing in the morning and home in the evening, anything that occurs in between then is going to be less. So that's why it's not typically studied, is that it's already covered in the worst case that we've projected for the morning and evening peak hours.
Okay. And then he did bring up the fact that Doyle Park Drive, it does become a one-way street. I'd say it's pretty much always a one-way street. I mean, you have anything you want to say about that?
One of the advantages of the design as it's set up, and as I noted earlier, is it's got access on Sotiomi. And so it will push traffic. The other piece of that is that the hospital is actually, even though it's not required as a mitigation measure, for traffic impacts, they are including as part of their project description a signal at Sotiomi and Sonoma Avenue. And part of the reason for that, again, is to push their traffic away from the neighborhood, out their door, and straight down to the arterial street of Sonoma Avenue. It was interesting because when we were first starting to look at this, I called Rob Sprinkle and I said, why are left turns still prohibited at Sotiomi now that it was restriped and then a center turn lane was put in it? And we both kind of scratched our heads and realized that it just had kind of gotten past both of us because we did the restriping plans for Sonoma and just didn't even pick up on the fact that, well, gosh, now there's not a reason for that left turn prohibition anymore. So all of this sort of led into then the signal and the idea of pushing the traffic out to the arterial street of Sonoma Avenue as quickly as you can and moving as much of it out of the neighborhood as possible. So we're not actually expecting very much traffic to use Doyle Park and in particular to the south of Montgomery, because there's really no path that's easier than going just straight out to Sotiomi and over to Sonoma that way.
Okay. So I think that takes care of the public's questions for you. We'll probably have some for you also. But Mr. Okamoto, maybe you can come up and address the issues about just the overall master planning ideas, some of the design issues that were brought up by Ms. Sunderledge.
Sure. One that I remember right offhand, because I'm smiling about it, is the location of the parking structure and the medical office building, and how we sited those buildings. And there was actually quite a bit of discussion at the concept DRB about that. That's one of the first things that we took back, because they were questioning the same thing. And we have studied this site, the size of it, the fire department access, how the site needs to work with the other buildings in the neighborhood. And we came back, listened to them. They said, well, if you really want that parking structure on the corner, because they were questioning it, they said, we're going to have to come back with a real good architectural solution to enhance the parking structure. And we in no way want to hide it, because it is a parking structure. We're not going to hide the building. So what we want to do is enhance the parking structure, make sure that it's not sticking out there as an eyesore, but that there's landscaping, that there's design features, that there's other elements on that building, and looking at specifically where they should be. And we feel it should be on the corner of Sotiomi and Montgomery. Spent a lot of time and expense to enhance that corner, to put the public art feature there, to do the plaza, enhanced landscaping, setting the building back, the parking structure back beyond the required setback, so there is more of a buffer. Those are the kind of things that we looked at, because we feel very strongly that the parking structure should be on the corner to allow better access to Sotiomi and to Montgomery. And it's clear wayfinding also. You have medical office, if we have the medical office building there, great, you get to the site. But people, when they're driving, they need to know where they're going to park. And it's part of the wayfinding also. So there's a whole host of reasons, and we felt that we addressed that with the design review board. And we're going to confirm that again next week. But at the second design review board, the issue didn't come up at all.
Okay. And then can you just discuss generally your memorial sort of ideas, or not, it's going to take somebody else, about sort of the master planning, and we may need staff's assistant to sort of help discuss what Mr. DeWitt was bringing up about buying up houses with the zoning general plan designations, how that impacts housing that might get bought up. So, but if you could just generally discuss how Memorial moves forward with these kinds of plans.
Sure, and just to supplement a little bit of what Wes said, because we did have a lot of internal discussion about the location and where the medical office building goes versus the parking garage, we were very thoughtful in thinking of our patient population and the fact that our community is aging, and ambulation is a challenge at times, for sure. So the parking garage with its main entrance was also structured there on the corner to give the shortest distance to our main entrance for the patients, and being thoughtful of how they get forth and ambulating. And obviously, having all of our services located, as Tyler said, in one location also reduces that amount of walking around basically for the population. The second point, and Tyler said this, but I just really wanted to emphasize this for your consideration, 75% of the building that we're building is going to be preoccupied by existing tenants that are located in the existing buildings that we have today. So really only about a floor's worth, or about 25% of this, is going to be net new growth that we have to support the area. As far as our overall planning, I thought the planner said it the best. We're really looking to fall within line of what was predetermined. Ambulatory services across the street supporting the hospital, trying to make sure that, frankly, if we do our job, we won't need to expand the hospital as much as we might otherwise, because we're taking care of people and keeping them out of the hospital. So we're really trying to maximize the asset that we have across the street, and making sure that we don't want to have a bigger footprint. It's costly for care, it's costly for the country, it's costly for local employers and others to provide more care in a hospital. So what we're trying to do is maximize the ambulatory space that we are given within the existing zoning while we work on the long-term plans.
And one addition about the parking and the number of parking stalls. There was a parking study that was conducted. It was specifically for this project. And so what we asked those parking consultants to do is, first, let's understand our current state. Surprisingly, because we didn't think this, the study shows that there's a sufficient number of parking stalls campus-wide, throughout off-site and on-site. Surprised us because we've heard the comments, complaints over the years, and it's not perception that we believe that it's true, that there's staff, there's patients, people parking in the neighborhoods. So we want to understand that. But again, the parking study said that there's the right number, or there's a sufficient number. It's just that they're maybe not in the right locations. It's not convenient. It's dispersed. For the hospital itself, the front parking lot's pretty small. Staff parks in the back, but it may not be convenient. So what we did on this is we want to make sure that we're putting this parking structure in the right place and we're right sizing it. So we took the parking study and we said, well, maybe, but we want to make sure. And at the hospital's expense, they've decided to opt to make it larger. So you can get visitors, you can get staff, you can get patients, you can get contractors, maintenance people, because it's a 24/7 facility. You don't know when the toilet's going to overflow. Plumbers have to come in all day long. Well, we don't want them parking on the streets anymore. We want them not parking in the structure. We want to make sure that there's available parking in this parking structure to accommodate that so we can respect the neighborhood. So that's why it's where it is.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay. And then, Mr. Streeter, could you address Mr. DeWitt's comments about the loss of housing and just generally how that is being looked at? Thanks.
So as this commission is probably familiar with, at the beginning of any residentially associated project, we always put up a slide that talks about our housing action plan. And that's the number of new housing units that the city wants to achieve in a certain period of time. And that's also related to our regional housing needs assessment, so the number of residential units that the city is responsible for providing in the area. And of course, any loss of housing also affects those numbers. And so based on our general plan and our housing allocation plan and our housing action plan, the city's identified areas of the city that are appropriate for various densities of housing, and that's where our general plan has our different residential density districts. There are also areas outside of those areas, such as commercial office, where housing is allowed, but it doesn't play into the city's overall plan for housing. It's kind of bonus areas where housing could be achieved. If I could just go to the zoning slide. So for the area around the hospital, the city has made a general plan determination that this is appropriate for office. And as the implementing zoning brings up the types of uses that are proposed with this project, anywhere in the CO district, which is applied through that general plan, include these medical offices and professional offices and then the supporting commercial uses. It does not exclude residential uses, but it finds that this is the more appropriate area for these commercial uses. The areas that the general plan designates for residential are most appropriate for residential uses. And as staff alluded to earlier in the presentation, if something is proposed that deviates from that general plan, that's where the general plan amendment and the zoning map amendment comes into play. And that requires its due scrutiny. So the public review, city staff review, environmental review associated with them. So yeah, this project is implementing the general plan and it's not impacting the city's overall goals for housing.
Okay, great. And then, is there an arborist report or?
I would check with our environmental consultant, but I'll just add to that. I'll refer to her in a moment, but the resolution for the conditional use permit, condition number 18, does include requirements for compliance with our city's tree ordinance, which will require at the building permit stage that a tree mitigation report is provided as part of the building plans.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners. Jean Kapolchak. Yes, there was an arborist report done. There was a tree inventory. It is a large tree. It's a 31-inch coast live oak tree. It is in it is in good health, according to the arborist report. Given its location, however, it needed to come out because it sits in the middle of the parking garage.
Okay.
But as indicated by Patrick, both the mitigation in the environmental document and conditions of approval were required to mitigate in accordance to the tree ordinance.
Okay, great, thanks. So I think that takes care of what I heard from the public. If staff heard anything else, you want to let me know.
Just have a few comments to kind of supplement what was said here in response. So regarding the traffic study and impacts as it relates to the California Environmental Quality Act, the purpose of the mitigated negative declaration document is to show that there's no decrease in level of service. That would then become a significant impact. And so that's why, as Ms. Whitlock alluded to, we look at the peak time. So that's the worst case scenario. If under that situation you would have a decrease in level of service, that's where the red flag would come up in the initial study that this is a potential impact. That also applies to the surrounding streets, which intersections were looked at, which were not. As you move further away from the project site, it becomes more difficult to assess if those changes to that intersection are related to the project itself, which is what CEQA is concerned with, or if they're related to circulation in general. So that's why there's a lot of care taken in the specific street segments and intersections that are assessed in those documents. Regarding the piecemealing comment that I heard, CEQA looks at what's called segmentation. So are you making a certain finding for one component of a greater project? And in the case of this project, there's nothing that's proposed or that has already taken place that is contingent upon this action. So the medical office building and parking structure is a standalone project as defined by CEQA. There's nothing down the road that would be enabled through the approval of this project. And that's where the extent of CEQA goes to as far as piecemealing. Now, whether or not a specific plan or a master plan would be a good idea from a planning standpoint, that's certainly up for debate. But as far as compliance with CEQA, this project as a standalone action is complying with CEQA. And lastly, just to discuss, the Planning Commission should be aware that if you approve this project, you are approving the site plan that was proposed with it. So when it goes before the Design Review Board, minor modifications could be in substantial conformance with the site plan, but something as major as flipping the location of buildings, that would require the project to come back before this commission, which is why the city has concept design review as in place, so that the site planning and other aspects of the project can be informed by the Design Review Board before it comes before this board or this commission where something could be locked in and not changeable. And as Mr. Okamoto mentioned, the idea of flipping the buildings did come up at the first concept design review and was addressed at the second concept design review with the specific intent that when the site plan went before the Planning Commission, there would not likely be major changes to it when it went back to the Design Review Board. So.
Okay, great. Thanks for clearing all that up. Okay, commissioners, questions that you would like to pose to the applicant or applicant team? Vice Chair Edmondson.
One of the public comments that we received, and I think I also heard it brought up as a possibility during one of the applicant team presentations, was activating the ground floor of the parking garage along Montgomery Drive. What are the considerations that go into that from the applicant's perspective? Is that realistic? Would that take away too many ADA parking spaces, for instance? Just if you could comment generally on your openness to that kind of idea.
I thought I was done. Yes, we've considered that on the corner of Sotiomi and Montgomery on the first level of the parking structure, and it is all on grade there. It's not part of our project today, not part of the capital approval to put anything in that corner except for parking. But what we have done, and we've identified that corner of the building as a significant corner, as a very important piece of a potential future. And we're thinking that that could be like a Starbucks type of a coffee shop or something right there. What we're doing is we're designing around that space, so nothing's going to prohibit us from doing something in the future. When the call is made that the need's there, or the funding's there, it'll be ready, it'll be set. We're looking at potentially even bringing utilities so we don't have to saw cut up the slabs, but it's all dollar and cents, evaluation at this point. But we're doing nothing so we can stop it. That's what we're trying to do, implement in the future. And that's right on the plaza level. That's why that plaza's there. So that way, eventually, hopefully, it can go right there, outdoor patio.
Can I maybe ask staff, is anything in the draft resolutions that we're looking at, would anything preclude that kind of development down the road, like a small neighborhood serving retail? Would that somehow take the project outside of what we're looking at?
No, there's no, I don't know if there's no. There are no requirements for minimum parking to be provided, so if some of those parking spaces were lost for another type of use, whatever use is proposed would be subject to whatever the zoning code requires. So, for instance, if a coffee shop required a minor use permit, that entitlement would be required, but it wouldn't, that, as far as staff is aware, unlock any of the existing entitlements that this project would receive.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Donegan, you have a question to the applicant or staff?
Perhaps a bit of a follow-up on this. In terms of the cafe, the way I read your documents was that by putting a cafe or any other facilities on the street, you're not adding or detracting from what your anticipated capacity is inside the parking structure. Is that correct?
Well, we would have to take out a few parking stalls to locate the cafe or the coffee shop right in that corner. And I believe we looked at it as far as traffic. So if we add the traffic for the cafe or the coffee shop in the future, we'll still be within limits. But it wasn't a formal review and study. We just want to make sure that, as Patrick mentioned, when we come back, that there's nothing that's going to say, no, we can't do it for any reason. We want to, in our minds, know that we can do it. And then we would be, you know, as Patrick mentioned, if we had to go through a use permit or something to that effect, we realize that. We would have to do that.
The reason I ask the question is that you are, in essence, purposely, and to me it's a good idea, of overbuilding the parking lot in that particular area as a benefit to the neighbors, as part of it. It's mutual benefit, obviously, but to the neighbors and to those streets that are often over-parked, in essence. So anytime you add different types of operations inside the structure, then you detract from what your goal is in terms of the numbers of overbuilt parking spaces for the neighborhood. Would that be correct?
Well, it would be, except we feel that we've designed this with enough parking. And this is the 600 stalls in the parking garage, plus there's another 58, I believe, on the surface. So, you know, we are what we feel is very safe in that number. Our parking study didn't say exactly how many we needed, but we're well within, or well beyond that number, that if we were to take out a dozen stalls in the parking garage to put something in the corner, I don't think it would make a difference as far as the overall count.
Okay. Any question? Yeah, Commissioner Duggan.
Yeah, I've got a couple for staff. For Mr. Streeter, who looks like he's preoccupied. So you mentioned that if we approve this today, that will lock in the site plan that's part of the packet. And today I forwarded on a revised site plan that was dated 12/11 that showed a different location of the trash and the emergency generator, and some of the parking spaces were changed. So we'd have to reference that one to have that one be the current site plan, correct?
My understanding is the location of mechanical equipment, things like that aren't specific conditions of approval or mitigation measures would be considered substantial conformance with the project. But it is part of the materials that have been brought forward as this approval. So that document would be included in this approval action. So,
okay, and it wouldn't be confusing to DRB that they have two site plans if that document was just attached to a letter?
It could be confusing, but staff will endeavor to make sure that it's clear.
Okay. Also, the question about the ARBA's report, do you have any information on why it was not presented as part of the packet and as part of our information?
My guess would that it should have been included as one of the attachments to the initial study. So that may have been just an oversight on staff, a clerical error of not including that.
Because I went back when we were talking about this, and there are apparently 86 trees on site, and 76 are being taken out, and I have no clue where they are. And I don't think my fellow commissioners have any clue where they are. So I think that's a real important piece of information.
Yeah, so noted.
Okay.
Thank you.
And also, I've got a question from Mr. Sprinkle about the traffic light on Sodiomi and Sonoma Avenue.
Good evening, Chair Cisco.
We had some correspondence, I believe, in the packet from people who live on Walnut Court, and they were apparently concerned that if we put in a stoplight at that intersection, that they might be precluded from turning westbound out of Walnut Court onto Sonoma. Is that correct?
We would not preclude that from that movement. We'd likely install a keep clear legend at their intersection, and then go to time the signal so that we can provide gaps along Sonoma Avenue in order to provide egress from Walnut Court, Walnut Court.
Okay, so they wouldn't be restricted which way they turn?
No,
okay.
No, we wouldn't put any restrictions there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, applicant, staff? Yeah, Vice Chair Edmondson.
I hope I'm not just going to ask you to walk back down. I just have a question. I think I recall reading in one of the reports talking about pedestrian safety and sight lines, that for figuring out the sort of stopping distance that's required for cars, that it takes into account the speed limit and not perhaps the actual speed that cars travel. Is it the speed limit that's sort of assumed that in terms of how much visibility a car needs for seeing pedestrians? Is that the measure that's used?
So typically we do use the speed limit. However, the speed limit is set using engineering traffic survey process where we actually take the 85th percentile speed of the vehicles, which is typically a little faster than the speed limit or than the posted speed limit, to set that distance, to set that stopping sight distance. So it's typically within a few miles an hour of the posted speed limit is what the 85th percentile, which is basically what most people are driving on that specific street. So it's within 2 or 3 miles per hour probably of the stopping sight calculation.
Okay, and are there any differences for recommended stopping distance or for calming or mitigation safety measures based on the population that we anticipate using a crosswalk, for instance? So we can expect, a higher percentage than normal of people who are ailing or elderly to be using this to require more time to cross. Also to be less able to withstand, God forbid, an impact from a car. So are there any kind of special dispensations for sensitive populations?
Yes, so one of the reasons, again, for the parking garage being located where it is and the design of the entry and exit points at the Sodiomi and Montgomery corner is that we want to facilitate the use of the signalized crossing at that location. And the signalized crossing has pedestrian ramps and it has a timed, crossing that's pedestrian actuated to ensure that the pedestrians do have ample time to cross the street. At locations where we do note a longer time for crossing, sometimes at more senior locations, we do increase the walk and clearance time for those pedestrians to provide them with ample time to make it across the street.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner Veronica?
Any other?
One quick question.
Sure, you bet.
Is it fair to say that when, say, the commission, whomever else approves a project of this sort, that between the point of that approval and the changes on the street, that your department would be doing refined traffic engineering as to how to really set up, be they signals, left turn lanes?
Absolutely,
so forth?
absolutely. We're intimately involved in the design of the traffic signals, and in this location, we'll be intimately involved with the rapid rectangular flashing beacon and the crosswalk, the striping, the signing, everything associated with those different aspects of the street infrastructure we are involved in.
Commissioner Weeks?
Actually, I have a question for Patrick.
Oh, great, thank you.
There was comments about public art on the parking structure, and would that be voluntary or would that be required?
That is triggered after a certain valuation threshold is crossed for a project. It's the art in public places requirement. So I believe for this project that would be triggered, so it would be a requirement for the project. Also, the Planning Commission or the design review could require art as part of the project, but it would be something that's triggered as part of the city code, and then that is addressed during the building permit phase where the Public Arts Commission is engaged to determine what type of art is appropriate.
So it's not referenced in the conditional use permit that it's required?
It's not, no.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else having any other questions? Think hard before we move to comments. Anything else? Well, it looks like Mr. Streeter has something else to tell us.
So I was just informed that sheet C1 of the plan set includes all the tree removals that are proposed. And then also staff has a recommendation for amending the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And the staff just wants to make sure that they're not missing anything.
So we're amending the under the MND, there's the attachment would be making some amendment, is that
correct?
What
so
you're talking about?
The resolution that would approve or adopt the mitigated negative declaration, staff's recommendation is that mitigation measure BR2 be eliminated from the MMRP. It lists a specific tree mitigation, whereas the typical way to address that is to require compliance with the city's tree ordinance, and the project would be required to comply with the tree ordinance anyway, so it's not a mitigation measure that's necessary for this project.
So we don't need it in the monitoring program because it's covered in the conditional use permit under number 18.
Correct, and
okay.
it's written erroneously in the monitoring program.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring it back to the commission. And like we've been doing, the mitigated negative declaration is the first resolution. If you could go ahead, somebody move that for the purposes of discussion of the entire project, and then we'll figure out where to put stuff as we go. So if somebody would like to make that motion. Nobody wants to read because it's long and a lot of numbers. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa adopting a mitigated negative declaration for the Santa Rosa Memorial. There's a typo on the second line there. For the Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital Medical Office Building and Parking Structure located at 1102, 1110, 1120, 1144, 1150, 1154, 1166, 1170 Montgomery Drive. 110, 114, 118, 122 Sotoyome Street, APN number 009 172 001, 002, 003, 004, 005, 006, 007, 009. Okay, 107, a new APN number 009 172 014, 019, 023, 003, 014-081-004-023, file number CUP 17-008, and waive for the reading.
And should we just go ahead and include removing the BRT at this point, and so we don't have to do a friendly amendment? Okay.
So it's removing what, ER?
It's B as in boy, R2, is that it? Okay, yeah.
Removing from the mitigation monitoring report reporting program, BR2, the condition, okay.
You're doing
I'm including that.
Okay. And do I have a second?
Second.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, everybody wants to second it. I don't blame you. Okay, so that was moved by Commissioner Duggan, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson. Vice Chair Edmondson, you want to start?
Sure, thank you. I think the project is good overall. It makes a lot of sense in terms of bringing order to the campus, making it easier for patients to get around, and you know, it's an important part of the economic health of the city. I think looking forward to be an attractive place for medical professionals and for patients. You know, usually when I see a project that's overparked, and I do believe this project is overparked, I am hostile to that kind of development, because even though it's easy to think, you know, I admit to sort of this gut feeling too, that how can too much parking be a bad thing? But when we continually build based on the assumption that people are going to drive, we space out our city, make it impossible for people to effectively get around by doing anything but driving. And we have a parking garage that's taking up a lot of street frontage in this project. And, you know, if it weren't that there were a parking garage there, there would be standalone destinations there that people could walk to, and we would, you know, have more of a cohesive neighborhood instead of, you know, just building yet another project where we assume that the only way that people are ever going to get there is to get in their car and drive. I would prefer to have a zoning code with parking maximums or measures like that instead of what we have, which is parking requirements. But of all the kinds of land uses where you want to have a parking garage, I suppose that a hospital makes the most sense, because it is by definition a region serving use. It's not only going to be serving people who are within walking distance or in the neighborhood, it is going to be a regional destination. So I can get past my misgivings about the overparking, although I think the project would be better with less of it. In terms of minimizing impacts on surrounding neighborhoods, these transition neighborhoods next to commercial are always going to be attractive for people to park in. I think that's going to be the case after the parking garage is there. And the way to minimize the effects of that is the parking district. There's really no workable way other than that to keep the spillover effects from affecting people. So I think that one of the best aspects of the project is the improvements to pedestrian safety. I think that the setback of the sidewalk from Montgomery Drive is a really excellent idea. The single crosswalk with better visibility, I think that's a critical change that's been needed there for a really, really long time. It's exceedingly dangerous to cross that street. And I think that by having all the pedestrians share one crosswalk, there will be more frequent use of it. The channelization makes perfect sense to me. That's a great contribution from this project. I would beg and encourage, and I want to hear from my fellow commissioners about this, that corner be made into an active use and not just be additional parking spaces, especially since the project is overparked. It can be easily spared, and it would create, you know, an attractive destination for not only people who are using the hospital facility, but just people in the neighborhood, people walking from place to place. And it would keep from having a big dead expanse of street frontage there at a relatively important spot in the relative center of the city, so I think that would make it for a much more civic and communal project instead of a private one. I'm not sure that I need to go so far as to treat that as a condition of approval, but I'm in support of the project.
Commissioner Groninger?
In reviewing the project, I really had no issues with the medical office building at all. And I thought from the start that if there's any questions or concerns, it would be the parking structure itself and the potential impacts on the streets, and thus the need for the traffic studies. And also realizing that, as Rob Sprinkle indicated, that to answer my question is that you continually refine the impacts once you build that building, and you're doing it probably, in this case, probably over a 2-year period, I'm just going to guess. And so we can't really say today exactly how those streets or the conditions will be. That's a problem that the traffic engineers need to deal with and will, I'm sure. About the parking structure itself, they're big boxes and they're massive structures, and they're inherently ugly. I know because I've built a couple of them. But in the case of the last one built, we did everything we could to make that building look less like a parking structure and more as an inviting architectural piece on the property. And that was proven to be correct. And so my suggestion would be to the architects, and this goes really into design review board, I think, anything you can do to pretty up the building is a real plus. And I'm particularly happy with the suggestion that the 70-foot tower, in essence, becomes a place for public art. That's good for a couple reasons. One, not only aesthetics in the neighborhood, but it also has a tendency to, that tower will take your line of vision off the mass of the building and up, and it becomes an attractive feature. As to the over parking, in taking a look at the I guess it was both in a project description and in the staff report. In essence, what we have here is a choice of designing to the average case of parking, which would be, I think, the city standard in this case that you were following was seeming like about 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. What you, by doing the overbuild, the purposeful overbuild, you're also planning for the worst case scenario, meaning that on the average, any structure of this sort is going to get overplayed at some point, and you're not going to be able to put everybody in that space if you went into that structure, if you went into or used steadfast 5 per 1,000 square feet. So I applaud you for adding the overbuild, especially in this district. We're not talking about doing this downtown in, on Mendocino or whatever, but this is a district, in essence, a hospital district that has different rates of turnovers and parking structures and, tending to the patients, the staff, and the community that comes in. So I think as long as you can, and I've heard 2 terms here, or the same term applied to 2 parts of this project. One on the operational is that you may consider having free parking as an incentive to bring those neighbors in to the lot or to get people off the streets, you're best off to do free parking. These are expensive facilities, however, to manage. Again, based on past experience, once you start charging, some people, irrespective of what the rate, they just won't come in. And so if you start charging, you're going to be shoving those neighbors back. That ultimately becomes a decision for the hospital down the road. But I applaud you for that effort. And it may entail also working with neighborhood parking districts or whatever. I don't know how that works, but anything to create that incentive, I think, is a real benefit to the neighborhood and to the hospital as well. The other point where the term may was used was on solar panels on the roof. I would encourage you to go that direction. And I'll borrow from the previous public hearing, their project description, when they talk about, in that case, it was cannabis cultivation as a thing of science and a work of beauty. Well, you can here do the same on this. And solar panels don't have to look any particular way. I tend to think they're nice to have, especially on the top of roofing structures, because it demonstrates to the community that you're serious about environmental and economics as it relates to power, energy. And two, they can be done in such a way that they're better to look at than a bunch of light towers going up 20 feet or whatever. And so I would encourage you to keep considering that. And with all that, I wholeheartedly endorse the entire project.
Great. Commissioner Weeks.
I don't have much else to say. That's already been said. I do think the consolidation of services makes sense, one-stop shopping for a lot of us. And I also agree with what Vice Chair Edmondson said about the pedestrian safety. Having been a frequent pedestrian in that area, I think that that's going to be very important, and I'm supportive of the project.
Commissioner Duggan.
On this one, I am in support of the project. I'll start there. I like the idea that it consolidates all those sort of small, funky buildings that have been there forever and all the funny front-end parking on Montgomery, and consolidates all those offices and puts them in a nice new facility. The parking, I can understand the need for parking. I think you do have to sell it to the public, though, because I believe that the two parking structures that are in the vicinity are underutilized. And I think it's because, I know when I go to an appointment in that neighborhood, if I see a street parking spot, I grab it. I don't ever go in the parking facilities. And I think people are reluctant to use them for a lot of reasons. If they feel like they're a little bit unsafe, or they don't know if there's a fee, or they don't know, what the deal is with the parking structure. But I think you do have to sell it to the public that's where they should go, the appropriate place to park when they're in the vicinity. Let's see. So my question about the site plan, and that was sent by the applicant's representative today, that was revised. That relocates the emergency generator away from the apartment buildings on Sotoyomi, and was, I think, started by a question that I posed to him when I met with them. And I really think it's important that we have that site plan adopted and not the one that's in the plan set, because I think the noise source from the emergency generator should be as far as possible from the existing apartment buildings. Let's see. I really want to encourage, I know it's hard that medical care and coverage and all this stuff is a moving target, but I really want to encourage the applicant to try and develop some kind of master plan. I live in the junior college neighborhood district, and I know what it's like to live next to a public institution, no offense to Commissioner Groniga, where you feel like they're trying to encroach into the single-family neighborhood, because they are. They're buying houses and tearing them down or making them offices, and if you had a master plan that you could go to the neighbors and show them that this is our best guess at what our build-out wants to look like, and this is our best guess for how many houses we want to buy for whatever use. It gives them a level of insurance, and then they don't have to come. This is their only mechanism to fight that when they have to come to a public hearing and try to be heard and try to get their concerns addressed. So I really encourage you to do some kind of master planning. Okay, and that's most of it. I'm okay with the height on the building. I think it is fine in that context. It's 4 stories. It's a little bit tall, but the hospital's 4-story. The medical office building is also 4 stories, so I think that's fine. I am okay, as Commissioner Edmondson said about the how he's reluctant to approve parking facilities that have more than the prescribed number of spots. In this condition, I can see where it could make sense with people coming and going at different times and not knowing exactly what the uses are. But I am a little bit concerned at the placement of it because it is going to be a big structure, as one of our comments saying that you have to walk 300 feet to get by it. But beyond that, I'm okay with the project.
Okay. Commissioner Peterson.
So again, I'll say at the outset that I am in support of the project. I'm going to echo a lot of the things that my fellow commissioners said very eloquently and thoughtfully. For me as well, the breakdown between the office, which I think is great, and the parking structure, which I had a lot more trouble with, was where I spent most of my time. When we're dealing with something that is so overparked, I think the question is, does it really add flexibility, or does it really just induce demand and kind of obliterate the area for other, perhaps higher uses? I think that's sort of an open question, but in developing this project and this parking structure, I would encourage the applicant to develop that bottom space for some kind of walkable, desirable use, whether it's a coffee shop or something else, as well as look at some of the other recommendations in the Caltrans letter, just about sort of encouraging transit utilization, carpooling, that sort of thing. I think when we're dealing with this parking structure, I understand the need to sort of future-proof things. At the same time, we do have kind of we know which doctors are coming in when and sort of what their patient loads are like. Do sort of know who's going to be there versus sort of transient parkers, people who are coming in to visit or would otherwise park in the neighborhood for a job or something. So again, I think I understand the desire for that level of parking, but I think sort of to mitigate the potentially bad effects of it, it would be good to have at least something on the bottom floor that's desirable from a pedestrian point of view, as well as integrated into the neighborhood, get people out and walking. So with that, I would be in support of the project and the heights as well as the parking.
Commissioner Paglia?
There's not a lot left to add after listening to all of this. I do support the project, and I think I also agree completely that it's important to hopefully be able to develop out that bottom floor with a coffee shop or something to that effect for the neighborhood. And it is, I understand that the consolidation of services makes complete sense, and the whole overparking issue. I think for this example, it also makes sense, and I support the project. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm also in support of the project, and I think it's pretty much been very well said by all my fellow commissioners, and so I echo their comments. So with that, the mitigated negative declaration resolution was moved by Commissioner Duggan with the elimination of BR2 in the mitigation monitoring report, seconded by Vice Chair Edmondson. And your votes, please. And that passes with 7 ayes. And one more time.
I'll move a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa making findings and determinations and approving a conditional use permit for the Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital Medical Office Building and parking structure located at 1102, 1110, 1120, 1144, 1150, 1154, 1166, and 1170 Montgomery Drive, 110, 114, 118, and 122 Sodiome Street, APN number 009-172-001, 002, 003, 004, 005, 006, 007, 009-172-014, 019, 023, 003, 014-081-004, and 023, file number CUP17-008. And can I revise it to include the site plan from 1211, or add that as well? Okay, and wait for the reading.
Second. Okay, the conditional use permit was moved by Commissioner Duggan with the clarification that the site plan being submitted is dated December 11th, seconded by Commissioner Weeks. Any further discussion? Your votes, please. And we need to get Commissioner Weeks. Oh, okay, we'll do it again. Your votes again, please. Oh, got. See, I told you. Okay, one more time. Your votes. And that passes with 7 ayes. And that concludes this agenda item and concludes our business for tonight, and we'll adjourn to our January meeting. And thank you.